If you were to ask anyone in the Half-Life community today, they will more than likely love Half-Life Opposing Force. Half-Life Opposing Force is one of 3 Half-Life 1 expansions contracted by Valve. There's Half-Life Blue Shift, which has you playing as Barney during the happenings of Half-Life 1. While there's nothing wrong with this expansion, it didn't really add a whole lot. It's about 3 hours long and it's fun to play, but mostly forgettable afterwards. Half-Life Decay is a multiplayer co-op expansion for Half-Life 1. You and whoever you play with play as Gina Cross and Colette Green during the events of Half-Life 1. This one is again fine, but due to being limited to people who have friends, which is rare in the Half-Life community, a lot of people never played this one. It's kinda on the same playing field as Blue Shift. Fun, but also forgettable. Half-Life Opposing Force, however, which actually released first of all the 3 expansions, was different. While still staying true to Half-Life 1 like Blue Shift and Decay do, it added a lot of new content. The game is also set at the same time as Half-Life 1, and has a player playing as Corporal Shepard, who is part of the HECU. It added a ton of new and creative weapons. Also new enemies, which actually came from a whole new race of aliens, Race X. You actually get to build up a bit of a squad during the game by meeting more HECU and fighting along with them. Opposing Force felt the most unique out of all the Half-Life expansions, and most people probably claim this to be their favorite. The expansions were never officially confirmed as canon, and even though Opposing Force was very well received and people wished to see its protagonist return someday, it never happened. But it almost did. Some of you might have heard about the so-called Half-Life 2 Episode 4, The Return to Ravenholm. It's an expansion to Half-Life 2 which we for a very long time knew almost nothing about except for a few screenshots and very limited footage. Valve contracted Arcane Studios to create this game but eventually cancelled it, seemingly out of nowhere. After a no-clip documentary about Arcane released, we learned a lot more about Half-Life 2 Episode 4. There are way too many cool things to mention about this game. But the most important fact you need to know right now is that the protagonist of this game would have been Corporal Shepard, set in the outskirts of Ravenholm. This was the closest we ever got to a Half-Life game featuring Corporal Shepard thus far. So now, with this brief history, we will get into what seemingly is an actual expansion to Corporal Shepard's story, Half-Life Prospekt. Prospekt was made by a singular person, Richard Seabrook, and was actually made as a job application. They mailed the game to Gabe Newell in a briefcase, which didn't get him a job, but a Steam release instead. After being greenlit on Steam Greenlight, which used to be a feature where games could be submitted and greenlit by the community to release on Steam, it hit the Steam stores in 2016 for $10, which means it was sanctioned by Valve. Now I know this doesn't really mean a lot ever since we got this, but Prospekt actually released before Hunt Down the Freeman did. Nowadays it seems easier to get your mod released on Steam. Many mods have done it. This was a very special event back then though, and is still now only one of 2 unofficial Half-Life games on Steam that charge money, the other one being Hunt Down the Freeman. On the store page it promised extended gameplay, with 30 new levels, all carefully integrated into the Half-Life 2 story. Greatly improved graphics, a return to Zen, which sounds really exciting. Much more brand new content and even much more content. And most importantly, it will continue the story of Opposing Force, telling the Half-Life 2 story from the perspective of Adrian Shepard. So with it being the only paid unofficial Half-Life game on Steam back in 2016, and with a description like that, suffice to say, expectations were high. The 2 main questions I'll be asking in this video are, did it deliver and is it worth your money? I will not go spoiler free in this video. Perhaps you're thinking, oh, a new Half-Life game, sounds great, I better keep myself spoiler free. While I get that thought, to be honest, there isn't a whole lot to spoil, and I highly advise you to watch this video before making the decision to buy this game. Shortly after its release, it was faced by a ton of backlash. People really didn't like it. Some saying that it's great work for being made by a singular developer, and others arguing that due to it being a paid game, it should be treated like one. After the initial backlash, the game got a big update that vastly improved a lot of things, which is also the only version I'll be reviewing here. It also got its price halved to $5 a couple years later. With the entire story leading up to the game as it is today being told, let's actually get into it. The game starts off with Vortigaunts talking to you. The voice acting is done pretty well, I must say. However, this intro lasts for a total of 4 minutes. Not trying to be nitpicky right from the get-go, but this intro is really long and unskippable at that. It consists of you not being able to move or look around and Vortigaunts talking to you, half of it being only played through the right speaker. It felt like I was watching an ASMR video.
My apologies for rushing you along, Shepard.
Put really short, we are told that Gordon Freeman is no longer an enemy and that we need to aid him in his fight in Nova Prospekt. We awake in a random room of Nova Prospekt and start moving through the prison. You will instantly notice some kind of color correction. I'm not here to say that this looks bad, but it does definitely differentiate the look of these levels from other Half-Life games. I think the look of the color correction comes down to personal preference. I personally don't have a problem with it. You will also notice that the comma invoices have been replaced. Not quite as good as other mods have achieved, but they're fine. While moving through these levels, you will come across flashbacks. These flashbacks appear in form of a change in color correction and hearing conversations.
Shepard, huh? Welcome to the HECU, man. Tougher shit, same pay, but you get to play with some cool toys.
These talks range from anything between joking around between soldiers to talks about the Black Mesa operation and the G-Man. In the commentary mode of this game, it stated that these flashbacks were included so that a story could be added without needing to add facial animations for characters, which I think is a fair and good workaround, and the concept itself is a cool idea. I will get into a few more things the commentary mode revealed later on. By the way, the commentary mode, it doesn't actually work in game. I had to go and listen to the actual sound files on their own. There is also this funny G-Man jump scare, which I don't really have anything to add to, I just found it funny. A big gripe I have with this game is the buttons, and specifically the color of the glow. You see, in Half-Life 2, buttons have a very high readability. In most cases, buttons you're able to press have a big green light on them, but even more often than that, buttons that can't be pressed have a red light on them. This game doesn't care at all about this. Buttons you're able to press are red and turn green afterwards. Some buttons, however, behave normally. Button readability in this game is bad, and caused me to press every button 5 times just to make sure I'm not missing something. Also, this game is way too dark. Especially in the beginning. I get that there are some design decisions which caused some rooms to be dark, but even when it obviously wasn't supposed to be so, it was really dark. Even after turning up my brightness all the way and turning my monitor brightness up completely, I still couldn't see anything at times. I think this happens when the person making the map has Half-Life 2 set to really bright and has a bright screen, so they don't notice if the level is too dark. After a few puzzles while moving through Nova Prospekt, you get your first weapon, the crowbar. I think receiving a crowbar is the first of many mistakes in terms of weaponry this game makes. In Opposing Force, you actually never receive a crowbar. You receive a wrench and a knife. The wrench swings a little slower than the crowbar, but it also has a powerful secondary attack to balance it out. I think most people playing this game were heavily expecting to receive a wrench instead, which, to be fair, would have been really easy to implement. Even if no secondary attack was added, a simple model change would have made it better. Opposing Force was known and loved for its unique weapons, which this game fails to implement entirely. You also magically just receive your suit. Opposing Force had a unique armor, the PCV, which actually used different charging stations. It made it unique in a cool way. Prospekt scraps that idea and basically just treats you like you have an HEV suit on. Some flashbacks try to justify this by mentioning any power source can be used to charge an PCV vest, and I can see why they didn't block the player from using combined charging stations due to later lore reasons, but it's still a shame this got changed. The first few levels have you moving through Nova Prospekt. The level design of this game is probably its highlight. It's all really detailed and looks-wise is great. Sometimes I'd even say it's too detailed, but that's a major nitpick. Overall, the looks of these levels are great. Also, the soundtrack of this game is great. Nothing much to say here, it simply sounds great and fits perfectly. So, great job on the soundtrack. You eventually arrive at the teleporter room you know from Half-Life 2. The room is already completely collapsed. At the teleporter there is still some kind of portal which you will have to enter. You teleport around a bit, similar to the beginning of Half-Life 2. You get teleported into some kind of Arctic base, the hallways from the beginning of Half-Life 2, Kleiner's lab, a church, and in front of a train. Finally, you arrive at the final destination, another Combine facility. The chapter is called Combine Power Co., so I'm just gonna assume this is the name of the facility we're in. And the level design here is pretty cool. As I said before, the level design is mostly the strongest aspect of this game, in terms of looks at least. The combat can be a little meh. Now I know that combat was never Half-Life 2's strongest aspect, probably even its worst, but there are ways to make it alright. Few enemies that are cleverly placed and sufficient cover. Prospekt doesn't really do this. Most fights with the Combine are big rooms with a ton of enemies and little cover. Playing this you will mostly be hiding behind a singular small wall and wait for them to rush at you to kill them. I played through this game on easy difficulty and still ended up turning on God mode eventually, simply because I needed to get this video done, so I can't imagine what this game would be like on hard difficulty. If you look closely you might notice that these Combine soldiers have Orbital Sector written on their back. Keep that in mind for now. So now in this facility we fight our way through, and as far as I can tell, with no real direction. There's this pretty cool Hunter mini-boss fight that I liked. Some might ask why Hunters are located here. The reason some might ask this is because Hunters are usually only stationed in the forest, outside of the city or infrastructure, which a ton of mods ignore anyways, but whatever. But in this case there's actually an answer for this, which I will get to later. After a bit more exploring, we fight another teleporter. This one takes a while to charge, similarly to the Nova Prospekt one. Now there is a lore question here. Combine were never able to figure out intradimensional travel. This is a big plot point throughout all of Half-Life. The Nova Prospekt one was actually the only one they had that they were able to figure out partly due to the help of Judith Mossman. And that one was really slow. So why do the Combine have another teleporter here? You could argue that they were building this one simultaneously to the Nova Prospekt one, which I think is an acceptable explanation. It also takes a while to charge and, from what I can see, is only able to teleport a single person at once. But it's still questionable and I can't imagine Valve would have ever decided to do this themselves. But regardless, this teleporter takes us to another Combine facility. This one looks really modern. The normal maps and cube map reflections here look really good. The combat is still pretty dull, however. Again, big rooms with lots of enemies. This is also where the game maxes out on the room hallway syndrome, because it's literally just that. There isn't much to talk about here until a bit later on, because we enter another teleporter that doesn't really take long to charge, which is where I think the lore really comes into question. This one takes us to Zen. We find that Zen has some combine parts built in it. They seem to be harvesting Zen crystals here. You go along this path, fight a couple combine, jump a couple of platforms and then leave. This is the entirety of Zen in this game. To market your game with the line "Return to Zen", only to have it be a 3-minute level at best is pretty bad. Also, this level added absolutely nothing to the game, and may I say, it looks like complete garbage. I'm sorry to say this, but it's literally just a couple of floating pieces of dirt. The islands all have this really bright glowing green outline. I think the fog destroyed any kind of visual quality this area might have had. With as simple of a change as turning on the fog density, this area could have looked better. But even then, this area looks really dry. There are close to no Zen flora around. It's actually somehow less detailed than the Half-Life 1 Zen iterations. And now we of course know how good Zen can look in Source, thanks to Black Mesa. But that's an unfair comparison to make, I must admit. So yeah, marketing it with a return to Zen doesn't seem true at all, and seems like nothing but fan service, a failed attempt at that. So then you teleport again, now back in the command facility you were at previously. At this point in the game you might notice the lack of weapons. You receive even less weapons than you did in Half-Life 2. For a game that is basically trying to be Opposing Force 2, this is really bad. You only ever get the crowbar, pistol, 357, SMG, AR2, shotgun, grenades and the RPG. None of them change in any way, which is a really big disappointment. Sometime later you get caught, put in prison and then get out again. After more room hallway fighting, you eventually get to the big reveal. You are in a combined space station. Remember those orbital units you were fighting? This is part of that team. This is an interesting idea, I must admit. Something not before seen or experimented with in the Half-Life universe. The room hallway gameplay loop continues. All while fighting through hordes and hordes of combine soldiers, which I'm pretty sure have had a health buff, which caused them to be simply just bullet sponges. You eventually get to some kind of reactor of the space station. You manage to overcharge the reactor, which causes the space station to be destroyed, and you get teleported out by Vortigons. Commence a way too long outro with no payoff. This is how the game ends. There are a few bonus levels which I'll very quickly mention before I get to the final points of my thoughts on this game. The bonus levels basically just consist of stealth test levels. I guess if you like stealth, these can be fun. There's also this unused level called Jack's Story Level 1, which is just some kind of room, which has no place in this game right now. But if you were to activate the beta branch of this game, Prospekt Phase 2, you will see a menu option for Jack's Story, but it says that this is coming soon. So this map seems to be the beginning of what we will get in Jack's story, although unfinished of course. But back to the main game. I want to get into a bit of the commentary mode, which I mentioned earlier. Now, when you actually go ahead and listen to the commentary mode and try to figure out where these commentary notes would have been placed if the commentary mode worked, you will notice that they are talking about completely different levels. This is due to the fact that this game was changed a ton. Even in the commentary mode, it's mentioned that the game was on its 3rd version already. And as it seems, it got changed a lot more at least one more time afterwards. For example, the Zen level is referred to in the commentary as a map where you fight against Vortigons and hear the G-Man talking to you. And also that it's only a dream sequence, not something that actually happened. And this is not due to the big update I mentioned at the beginning of the video, the one where a lot of things were improved. The commentary is talking about a version we have never seen, but we also get to extract some relevant info about this game. The biggest change being that it was originally planned that this game takes you through the forests and some kind of power plant. The power plant levels were reused in this level, for example. This is also why hunters are here. This level is meant to take place in a forest of some kind, which makes the hunters make sense again. The original story was that the Combine were charging up some reactor that they were planning to blow up in case they lost City 17 to the Resistance in order to destroy the entire city. But due to some holes in the story, the maker decided to change it to what we know today. Now, looking back at this game, the flashbacks are well done mostly, the level design looks nice and is generally done well, the combat is meh, the story is hard to justify in the lore, the promise of Zen was not broken but fell pretty flat. Updated graphics however were delivered. A revisit to Nova Prospekt was included, the voice acting was pretty good aside from a bit of the writing, and the soundtrack is amazing. So while I spent most of my time in this video critiquing this game, I will not go as far as to say that this game can't be enjoyed. It's well made levels with a bit of story tied to it. So, to get back to my two main questions in this video. Did this game deliver? Yes, it kinda did. Aside from the promise of Zen falling short, it mostly did everything it set out to do. 30 new levels that equal about 90 minutes of playtime, with improved graphics and a great soundtrack. The other main question being, is it worth it? Well, no. Definitely not. I highly advise against buying this game. The only way I could justify buying this game is if you're really deep in the Half-Life community and want to be able to take part in conversations about it and perhaps learn what to do better if you're a Half-Life 2 modder yourself. And even then, I'd suggest waiting for it to go on sale. I personally waited until recently where it went to around a $3 sale. Truth is, if this game was a free mod, it probably would be praised a bunch. It would obviously still get criticism where criticism is due, but it being paid removed the biggest benefit of the doubt Half-Life 2 mods usually have, which is that they are usually free. If you truly crave more Half-Life, there are a ton, and I mean truly a ton of more Half-Life 2 mods to play that offer a better experience for free. Mods like Thunder's Leaves, which I have covered on my channel, Entropy 0, 1 and 2, which I will probably also cover someday. A ton of other mods, for which you can check out my 3 great mod series on my channel if you would like to see more. Okay, this shameless plug is over for now. One mod I would especially like to shout out in this video is Through the City. This is a free mod that aims to be a continuation of Adrian Shepard's story. While graphically not being on the same level as Prospekt, it features some pretty good level design, new custom weapons, which is arguably the most important aspect, and also actual voice acting done by the voice actor of Dr. Kleiner, which is incredibly cool to see.
Oh, you've woken up. Corporal Shepard, is it? I've read the tag on your uniform. I'm glad to see my life-saving efforts weren't in vain.
The mod is still in development, but there's a demo version that includes the entirety of the first chapter. The full release is planned for 2024. So if you do truly want more Adrian Shepard content, perhaps play this instead before you spend money on Prospekt. So, all in all, I obviously still commend the creator of Prospekt, Richard Seabrook, for his great work on Prospekt. Having watched an interview of him, he seems like a great guy, who genuinely just wanted to create a great piece of Half-Life content, and while flawed, he definitely can be proud to call himself the maker of this game. And also a massive shout out to all mod creators in general that are keeping the Half-Life community alive. Check out my other videos, and otherwise, thank you for watching.